People in America trusted Walter Cronkite. JFK was the most loved president in history. They looked like friends on TV, but behind the scenes, they were always fighting. Kennedy once tried to back out of an interview that had already been filmed. He told the people in charge of the network about Cronkite. Cronkite stomped into Kennedy's guest room and was very angry. The president cared more about how he looked than what he was saying. The reporter saw everything. Their secret fights were kept secret for decades. Secret for decades. We'll tell you what really happened between these two American stars today. Walt Cronkite was born in 1916 in Missouri. He was the only child in his family. His dad worked as a doctor. His mom stayed home. He always thought of Kansas City as home, even after they moved to Houston and then Kansas City. Walter was interested as a child. He wrote things down, read encyclopedias, and asked questions that no one else did. As a high school student, he was in charge of the school newspaper, ran for office, and even won a state award for writing. Because his folks were having a hard time with money, he also did odd jobs. His first year at the University of Texas was 1933, but he dropped out after 2 years to work full-time in newspapers. He started working for United Press in 1937. That's where things went from there. He studied with the military as one of only 8 combat reporters during World War II. He bombed Germany from the air and sent news from the front lines in Normandy and the Battle of the Bulge. Now that the war was over, he helped set up bureaus all over Europe and was made the head of the Moscow office. What he went through in those years made him into the person who is now known as the most trusted voice in America. The world was very different when John F. Kennedy was born. He had a lot of money, power, and family ties. But before he could even speak, his body was breaking down. He was sick all the time. There was scarlet fever, stomach troubles, and a lot of infections. In his teens, he lost too much weight, which was bad. It was hard for doctors to figure out. Later, they said he had colitis, but it was more likely celiac disease. He tried a lot of different treatments, such as putting pills under his skin. That did help a little, but it made his bones weak. He was finally told he had Addison's disease in 1947, while he was out in England. In 1954, things got worse when one of his backbones broke. He had to use sticks. He was in pain all the time. He had dangerous surgery on his back and told his dad he'd rather die than live that way. He still became a war hero, though. He was on his boat when a Japanese ship hit it in 1943. Kennedy swam for 5 hours while holding a strap in his teeth and pulling a hurt crew member behind him. He would always remember that moment. He was sick, weak, and in pain all the time, but he was so strong it was hard to believe. In 1960, there was a change in American politics. People were not only listening to the presidential discussions for the first time, they were watching TV with them on. A lot of people watched as Senator John F. Kennedy and Vice President Richard Nixon fought on TV. But there was a quiet tug-of-war going on behind the scenes long before the cameras came out. Walter Cronkite was in the middle of it. Cronkite had planned for both candidates to be interviewed by CBS several times. He wished things were fair. He was aware that the person who went first might be in a worse position. He then asked Nixon if it was okay for him to go first. Nixon didn't think about it. He said, "That's fine. Everything is fine." Things became tense when Cronkite told Kennedy. Kennedy did not believe him. He snapped, "He hasn't agreed to it." "What do you mean?" It was a small thing that showed something bigger. Kennedy was careful, maybe even suspicious, but he picked up things quickly. Kennedy finally decided to do the interview, but he didn't like it when it aired. He didn't think he did well. As soon as shooting was over, he told CBS to cancel it. He then went around Cronkite and called the people in charge of the network. He wanted to do everything over. Cronkite was very angry. He walked right into Kennedy's room and saw the senator laying on his back next to his speechwriter. Cronkite didn't yell. He agreed to do it. Kennedy could do the interview again, but CBS would show a message that said it was his second try. That really stopped Kennedy. That was something he knew would look good. He gave up, though. He learned how strong TV really was. He began getting ready like never before. He practiced giving answers, remembering facts, and keeping a cool face. Nixon, on the other hand, didn't care about the cameras. He was easy to miss because he was dressed in a light suit. He didn't put on any makeup. He looked pale, tired, and sweaty under the hot studio lights. Kennedy looked strong and sure of himself in his dark suit and good lighting. The mayor of Chicago made a joke when he saw Nixon on TV. "My God, they've embalmed him before he even died." Kennedy used TV very well and knew how to do it. He had it down pat by the third discussion. He could talk to the camera as if he were talking to you. Even when he was planning what to say, he seemed natural. Kennedy was in New York on October 13th, and Nixon was in Los Angeles. They were in different places, but it didn't matter where they were. Kennedy looked straight into the camera and spoke easily. He made it sound easy and honest when he talked about foreign policy and the islands of Quemoy and Matsu in China. Cronkite later said that those arguments changed everything because he saw them all. It was a different kind of politics. When Kennedy was elected, though, Cronkite began to see things differently. Kennedy looked like a hero on TV. After the show was over, Cronkite thought he was someone else. Later, Cronkite said that he was very self-centered, almost to the point of egotism. He saw that Kennedy was having a hard time working with Congress. A lot of politicians didn't like how quickly he rose. They didn't believe he deserved it. That wasn't helped by Kennedy. He had a hard time getting things done. A lot of his big ideas didn't become law until after he died. What he did in other countries also seemed shaky. Kennedy said in a speech that this had to be the Vietnam War. They need to understand that this is not our war. But he changed his mind later. He sent more troops. He made the war about America. Cronkite remembered that very well. He believed that Kennedy's deeds did not match what he said. The truth is that most Americans didn't see that side. They saw the Kennedy that Cronkite showed on the evening news. He was young, sure of himself, and good-looking. He beat Nixon not with better ideas, but with better lighting. He won the argument by being ready. Sharper clothes and a calmer face when things get tough. Walter Cronkite had seen political spin before, but April 1961 was the first time it really hit him. At that point, the Bay of Pigs attack was one of the worst mistakes the U.S. ever made in its foreign policy. It was an event that Cronkite would never forget. People who work for CBS and the New York Times already knew about the attack plan. American-trained Cuban rebels were getting ready to land and remove Fidel Castro from power, but the Kennedy government told them not to say anything. They said it was for the safety of the whole country. Later, Cronkite said it was an act of loyalty. The Times backed off. CBS did the same thing, and the peace may have helped the plan go forward. After many years, Kennedy himself said, "Maybe we would not have gone to the Bay of Pigs if the New York Times had printed that." The assault went badly. Cuba's troops were ready. Either the attackers were killed or caught. Cronkite said that it ended any chance of peace between the U.S. and Cuba and hurt the young president, who was still getting used to being president. After a year, Kennedy did something else, but not in public this time. The New York Times had a front-page story on July 26, 1962, that the Soviets were making covers out of concrete for their missile bases was what it said. The story also showed what spy cameras in the U.S. could really see. Robert Kennedy told the FBI to start listening in on phones that same day. First, an office worker at the Times office. Next, the New York home of the reporter. This quickly grew into something much bigger. After a month on August 22, Kennedy met with John McCone, who was the director of the CIA. He told him to start keeping an eye on reporters. The CIA didn't follow the rules and spy on people in the U.S., but they did it anyway. Project Mockingbird was the name of the plan. A lot of top staff members who had access to secret information were told to write down everything they did with the press. In 2007, after many years, papers about the process were made public. The New York Times said that Kennedy tried to do the same thing with the CIA before Nixon built his own unit to stop leaks. The operation went on until 1965 and went after reporters all over the country. Some of them were famous columnists, like Paul Scott and Robert S. Allen. It was a bad standard for presidents to follow. From the beginning, Cronkite's friendship with Kennedy was tense. Cronkite said in one interview that Kennedy once complained about sitting on a soft sofa during a TV appearance. Kennedy said it made him look weak and not like a president. Cronkite was shocked. He thought the president cared more about how things looked than what they said. We also saw that Kennedy often answered before the question was over. However, Cronkite said it was likely because Kennedy had a quick mind, but it still made him mad. He didn't like how the president ran the news either. CBS and other news outlets only got parts of the story during the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962. The White House was in charge of everything. It was managed, filtered, and only showed one side. Cronkite later said that reporters never got to see all the things that were going on behind the scenes. During Kennedy's time in office, that strain stayed with him. The people never saw any of this, though. They saw a young, strong boss. They didn't know that Kennedy was in a terrible battle inside his own body. The president was on a mix of drugs during the tense days of the missile situation in October. He took antispasmodics for colitis, medicines for a urinary tract infection, steroids like hydrocortisone, and testosterone to deal with issues with his adrenal glands. To stay stable, he took painkillers, sleep aids, tranquilizers like Librio, salt tablets, and even amphetamines like Ritalin. On paper, he looked like a pharmacy on wheels. Kennedy was in pain all the time behind closed doors. In particular from his back, which had been hurt years before. That probably got worse because of some of the drugs he was on. A disease that was talked about was Addison's disease. In 1959, historian Arthur Schlesinger Jr. asked him directly about it, and Kennedy said, "The person with real Addison's disease should run for president." No, but he himself did not have it. In a way, he was telling the truth. When it was first described, Addison's disease had to be caused by TB of the adrenal glands. Kennedy didn't have that, but he did have adrenal failure and had to take steroids all the time to stay alive. It's likely that treatment made his bones weaker, especially in his spine. Something happened on November 22, 1963, that will never be the same again in TV. At 1:14 p.m. on the East Coast, CBS cut away from a soap opera to give a news report. In Dallas, shots had been fired at President John F. Kennedy just 10 minutes before. But back then, it wasn't as easy as turning on a camera. It took at least 20 minutes for the studio cameras to get ready. Walter Cronkite, who was America's most trusted newscaster, had to go live with just his voice. No picture. It was just sound over a black screen that said CBS News Bulletin. There was no face. At home, people heard Cronkite talk quietly, even though chaos was going on behind the scenes. He read the first email, then the second, and finally the third. There were shots first. After that, Kennedy was hit. The last thing is news that the president may be dead. Cronkite didn't say it was official, though. He didn't say anything. He held out. The cams finally turned on at 2 p.m. Cronkite showed up on TV without his jacket on. He looked tense and short of breath. He kept going, though. He told the country what was going on for almost an hour, never letting his feelings get in the way. When the clock struck 2:38 p.m., everything changed. There were words from the Associated Press wire that Cronkite looked at and read. The flash, which seems to be real, comes from Dallas, Texas. It was 1 p.m. Central Standard Time when President Kennedy passed away. He looked at the time and said, "Half an hour ago." He then took his glasses off, blinked, and cleared his throat. His voice broke for a split second. A lot of people in the U.S. saw it. The man on TV, who was the most calm, was breaking down. The whole country knew it was okay to feel something in that very short pause. Cronkite didn't stop for 4 days. He was on the air for almost 72 hours straight. He led the country through shock, loss, and chaos. It was no longer just reporting. It was history being made in real time, and all three big networks watched it nonstop.